Welcome to this RSCM video conversation about using music in worship when we can't sing as we go back into our gathered congregations. I'm Helen Bent. I'm the Head of Ministerial Training for the Royal School of Church Music, working in partnership with Praxis. I'm also parish priest in the benefice in Walgrave with 4 rural churches. And so we've been managing worship in lockdown. I'm joined in conversation by Mark Underwood and Jonathan Robinson. So I'm going to invite each of them to introduce themselves briefly too.
Hello everyone, my name's Mark Underwood. I'm an organist and a conductor. I'm currently Director of Music at St Michael's Chester Square in central London. And for about 20-ish years now, I've been involved in training young musicians and churches and church streams in how they can develop values within their worship that will inform their structures and their visions.
Hello, yes, I'm Jonathan. I began working for the RSCM initially whilst completing an MA at Sarum College, looking, among other things, at congregational participation in contemporary worship music. Before that, I was full-time director of music at a large evangelical C&B in Sussex, and prior to that, a couple of years as resident musician at Iona Abbey. I grew up in the Methodist Church, and I'm presently music coordinator of the congregation, theoretically meeting here in Salisbury. So I'm a bit of a liturgical mess.
Thanks very much. We all know that singing is really important as part of our worship, and we know it's been a lifeline to people during the lockdown through the RSCM Hymn for Today and the Archbishop's daily phone line, Daily Hope. So worship without singing, we know already that's going to be a challenge. Whether we're a congregation with straightforward hymns, whether we have a strong choral tradition, whether we're really reliant on the worship song repertoire, how we do music is going to be quite different. But it does also give us a genuine opportunity for experimentation. I think whereas at the beginning of lockdown, everything happened very quickly and we were very ill prepared, so we were kind of making it up as we went along. Now we actually have a little bit more time to plan ahead, to think what we're going to do. We're going to need flexibility and imagination. We can't assume that there won't be a second wave or other lockdowns. We've already seen a small lockdown in Leicester. So we are going to need to put in place some steps because we are facing a process of recovery, and that will require some creative thinking to form some sensible steps that we can follow along the way, interim measures that will help us get back to a new normal, whatever that looks like. We're going to need some models of good practice and some structures and formats that are going to work well for the average ordinary church. So guys, what do you think public worship might look like with no singing?
Well, in some ways it's been a chastening experience for us as church musicians over the last few months to realise that potentially we're dispensable. I think I've been encouraging our folk here at St Michael's actually to look beyond the current period and actually to think creatively and dream about what worship might look like when we come back. And I think one of our guiding principles has actually been what it means in terms of our community. And I think that is a key thing for as a church as a whole, but in individual communities. What does it mean for us as a community? How can we be community when we come back, and how can we worship as community? I think we have learned that the church is the gathered people of God, and we miss it, but we can dream about what it will look like when we come back.
Following on from that, I think it might be an occasion on which we attempt to be a bit more indigenous, perhaps develop something that really works for you. I'm aware that before this, I think many of us would attempt things musically in worship that maybe did not work that well with our congregations. And it's okay if you're on a journey, but if regularly we're going somewhere that doesn't quite work. So I think this could be an opportunity maybe to come out of this with worship that's even more creative. I think some of the traditions with which I've been involved have been historically a bit nervous about instrumental music. What does it mean without words? For which I would perhaps refer you to the parables. They're not always explained. And so perhaps this is an opportunity actually to positively develop something more genuine and local.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to realise that the government guidelines are permissive and not prescriptive. And so what we do in each church, there's no one size fits all, and we will be approaching things quite differently to make that indigenous, authentic worship in our own situations. I think we've probably already proved that we're capable of a lot more than we thought. But we do need simple structures that actually work. So flexibility will be key. And of course, some of us find that kind of fluidity and playing around in the unknown a bit more difficult than others. I think it's also perhaps worth remembering that some people do enjoy a said service. And, you know, sometimes actually that can be quite helpful. I know certainly when I was bereaved, I found a said service was quite helpful because I actually found it very difficult to sing. So, you know, I think we'll find all sorts of new insights that we didn't expect. And perhaps a broadening of our musical offering will follow. But there's also a danger that it'll end up all being rather quiet, subdued, and a bit passive. So what do you think are the ways of avoiding that, and various ways in which we can use music without singing?
I was just going to say as well, just following on very briefly from what you just said, I think it's also important when we consider this sort of thing to realise that we may not get it right straight away.